Hi, I'm Tim from the Board Game Rundown, and today I'll be showing you how to play Ozark, the board game based on Netflix's popular television series. In this game, each player chooses one faction to play based on characters from the show. You can play as the Birds, the Navarro cartel, the Kansas City mob, the townsfolk, or the FBI. You'll get a unique deck of action cards for the faction you choose. Each faction also has a unique weakness that comes into play at the end of the game. Ozark is a territory control game that includes a money laundering mechanic. The goal is to get to the last turn with the most laundered money. The game rules refer to the clean money as stashed. You gain and stash money by playing action cards and getting the effects from the properties you control. There are also opportunity bonuses that happen at the end of each round. Now let's set up the game for play. First, we set up the property tiles. We will put out 3 of the property tiles, and we need to do this in order from left to right. Poppy Fields, Casino, and Lickety Splits. Now we take the remaining property tiles, shuffle them, and place them into a face-down pile. Later in the game, more tiles will be drawn from the shuffled pile and added to play. Next, each player chooses a faction. Look over the faction cards and pick one that you like. Let's look at the card for the Birds. At the top of the faction is the name, and under that is the faction's weakness. The penalty listed here happens to this faction's player at the end of the game before a winner is determined. Under the weakness is a chart of what happens on the turn track, called the opportunity track, each turn. This is the same for all players, and it's just listed here as a handy reference. Next, each player gets a hand of action cards for their faction. This is the hand for the Birds. Now each player gets the 5 influence tokens for their faction. Next, each player gets 5 $10,000 bills. Finally, the conspicuous token gets assigned to one player. The rules say that this should go to the most suspicious looking player, but if you have a Bob in your group, I'd say give it to him. The conspicuous token marks which player goes first in a round. It can change at the end of each round. Now we're ready to talk about gameplay. In every round except the first, the players gain the effects of any properties they control. This doesn't happen on the first round because at the start of the game, nobody controls any properties. Next, each player plays one of the action cards in their hand. The player with the conspicuous token goes first. Then play continues clockwise. Your card might have influence symbols on it. If so, this allows you to try to establish control of properties which have matching symbols. For example, the Shrewd Investment card from the Birds deck has 2 influence symbols showing money stacks. This means you can put a Bird's influence token on Poppy Fields, the Casino, the Lakefront, or the Navarro back room. Let's go over how you could place your influence tokens in our example with the Shrewd Investment card. If you don't already have an influence counter on the property, you can place one on row 1. If you already had an influence token on this property, before playing the card, move the token up a row. In our example, the Shrewd Investment card has 2 influence symbols on it, which means you can either use your influence twice on the same property tile or use 1 influence each on the 2 different property tiles. Keep in mind, though, that in this example, you can only use influence on property tiles that have the money stack influence symbol on them, because those were the influence symbols on the card we played. After spending influence from the card you played, if a card also has an effect text, you get that effect now. To continue our example, if you play Shrewd Investment, you can copy the effect of a property you don't control. But if you do, opponents controlling the property can stash up to $10,000 themselves. Finally, the player or players whose cards have the highest power number in play that round will get the opportunity bonus for the current round. So if you've played the Shrewd Investment card and all other cards played this round had power numbers below 5, you alone would win the opportunity bonus. Or if one or more other players have also played 5s but no higher number was played, then all players playing cards with level 5 would get the same bonus. Now, if it's the end of round 1, the player or players winning the opportunity bonus would gain $50,000 and an extra influence on any property, which they could place right then. Note that since there are 7 game turns and 8 cards in each faction hand, you'll always end the game with 1 unplayed action card. 2 times during the game, you'll add property tiles from the shuffled stack of those remaining. It happens once between turns 1 and 2, and once between turns 3 and 4. There are also 2 places on the opportunity track with shakedowns. For example, at the end of round 2, all players lose $40,000 in 1 active property influence level. Some cards have effect text that specifies something happens at the end of the next round. In that case, the card text effect happens after the opportunity bonus is awarded, but before adding properties or resolving shakedowns. When you begin any round after the first, some of the property tiles will now very likely have player influence tokens on them. As the round begins, whoever has control of each property will gain the effect described on that property's effect text. For example, here the townsfolk player has a token on row 2, but the birds player has a token on row 3. Since the birds player's influence is higher, that player has control of the property and gets $30,000. In this example, though, 2 players have tokens on row 3, and no other players have tokens any higher than that. In this case, both the birds player and the Navarro cartel player control the property, and they both get the property's effect, so they'd each get $30,000. Property effects are resolved in property layout order from left to right. The game ends after the 7th turn is completed. At this point, every player should have 1 unused card left in their hand. Now, each player gains the effect of every property they control 1 final time. Next, each player's faction weakness is checked. If the player hasn't protected against it, they'll lose some stashed money. For example, if you're playing the birds and you haven't played at least one of these 3 listed action cards, you'll lose $50,000 of your stashed money. Finally, it's time to determine a winner. This is done simply by counting up each player's stashed money. The player with the most wins the game. If players tie, then the player with the highest power card remaining in their hand wins. If there's still a tie, then the tie stands, and all players with the highest amount of stashed money and the highest remaining card power are considered the victors. So that's how you play Ozark. If you play the game, let us know how it went by posting in the comments. Thanks for watching.